Well, joining me for more on this is criminal defence lawyer and human rights campaigner Aamer Anwar. Aamer, so Theresa May has called for a full public inquiry into this, and as we've just heard, there are calls for the government itself to be held to account. So is it fair that the government should be scrutinised as well in that public inquiry?
Absolutely. I think the whitewash has actually already begun. The very fact that Theresa May is talking about a public inquiry in any other country, we would be talking about a criminal investigation. Criminal charges being brought for corporate manslaughter. The fact that the Tory government sat for 4 years, 4 of our ministers knew that these buildings were vulnerable to fire. The fact that millionaires had this building clad in plastic in order that they didn't have to look at that building and they could sell luxury flats is unacceptable. People in that building had been saying for years that it would take a catastrophe for people to die. And let's be blunt here. People died in Grenfell Tower because they're poor. And that is a disgrace in the 21st century in this country, in the United Kingdom. And Theresa May, when she visited Grenfell Tower today to meet with the emergency services, for her to cry crocodile tears, to praise the emergency services firefighters who risk their lives running into burning buildings, risking their, men and women risking their lives and having to hear the agonizing screams and not being able to help, when the very same Tory government actually axed 552 firefighters, shut down 10 fire stations when Boris Johnson was mayor. This is the impact of a Tory government cut. Some people have known about this for years, and the reality is that tonight there are 4,000 other high-rises throughout the United Kingdom, in England and in Wales, where people will be scared whether their buildings could also go up in flame. It's the bottom line here is money. There was 18 MPs who are in the present Conservative administration who are out of 72 MPs who voted down amendments from Jeremy Corbyn last year that would have made buildings fit for habitation. This should be a criminal investigation.
So what went wrong?
People
when you're talking about money,
people losing lives.
You're talking about money, and there is a lot of criticism that not enough is being invested in social housing, but almost £10 million, or perhaps just over £10 million, was invested in that particular property. So what has gone wrong? What has gone wrong there?
£300,000 is what it would have cost to have fitted sprinkler systems in that building. That would have saved lives.
Where did the money, £10 million, go?
Well, that's where the criminal investigation should go, because I suspect very much that it didn't go to actually protecting the lives of these peoples. It didn't meet the health and safety standards and regulations required. £300,000, £3 million on cladding on the outside of the building that helps it to go up in flames. Listen to every single firefighter in this country that has spoken about what happens as a result of that cladding. It would have cost £4,000 to have a fire extinguisher on every single floor. Fire alarms were not working. People were talking in that building of the fact that they couldn't hear the fire alarms. People died because these people were unwilling to spend money on that building to save lives. And the reality is the gentrification of these areas, where luxury developers want to come in and want to see people's standards driven down. They want to not actually implement things that will save their lives. And then we have a government that actually sees it as over-regulation. Last year they voted down an amendment to a law that would have made buildings fit for habitation, i.e. fit and safe to live in, but they voted it down because the Tories said it was too much over-regulation. And God forbid that when we have Brexit coming in, what health and safety standards will be thrown out of the window simply because a bunch of land developers, and I'm being blunt here, I am extremely angry, as are many people in this country, because people, children, families died in that building.
So,
they could not
Theresa May has promised that people will get answers. Will that public inquiry? Will that public inquiry answer those questions?
No,
those poor
because
people
when you have the government that is responsible for the cuts and the loss of lives, setting up what the parameters of the inquiry are, we are heading towards a whitewash of inquiry. I wouldn't trust Theresa May with any inquiry. It should be an independent inquiry. It's all very well for her to fix the judge. We should remember that the parameters of the inquiry are set by the Home Secretary or are set by Theresa May. That should not be in their hands, because we've had reviews before and nothing was done. By 4 successive ministers, nothing was done to save lives. And yet again, we now have another inquiry. How many more public inquiries? Don't ever forget the Bloody Sunday inquiry. Don't ever forget the Hillsborough inquiry. Inquiries where whitewash after whitewash after whitewash took place. What we want to see, and what families want to see, and those who are grieving want to see, is criminal investigations that get to the root of the problem and finds out who's responsible, who Who profiteered from the loss of life? Who profiteered and wasn't willing to spend money on saving people's lives? It's unacceptable. It's barbaric that people tonight are sleeping in halls, that the local community has had to collect money, and, you know, people who have absolutely nothing are digging deep into their pockets to provide for these families, Muslims, non-Muslims, people who save lives that night, and firefighters who regularly are attacked by this Tory administration, and they run into these burning buildings, and yet we know that across this country the Conservative government is still preparing to shut down fire stations, still attack the firefighters. If they want to have a rethink, I want a parameters of an inquiry that addresses the criminal actions of the luxury developers, the criminal actions of the council, the failures to actually listen to what the residents themselves had spoken out about for years, and why it is those individual MPs failed to implement the reviews that demanded and said that buildings like Grenfell Tower were vulnerable to fire. The fact that they chose not to do so is criminal, absolutely criminal, and people lost their lives because of that, and Theresa May should resign.
Aamer Anwar, thank you very much indeed for joining us live on RT UK.